I'm going to go to the payroll raw data worksheet. This is just some payroll information based on each of the employees. So we've got this column for employees, and I want to be able to analyze this very quickly and easily. And this isn't a table. I know it's in a table because if I click on a cell, I have my table design tab up at the top. Plus I can see I've got banded rows and I've got my drop downs for my filters. But I want to actually do a couple of formulas with you. And I kind of pre-designed this a little bit where I'm going to go to the gross wages. And on L1, I want to create a formula that gives us the sum of the gross wages. Now, of course, I could do just a regular sum to analyze that data, but what if I wanted to change as we filter this data? I could actually do it as a subtotal function instead. So I'm going to do equal SU. I'm going to double click on the function called subtotal. And by the way, if you've never seen this before, when you start typing, the functions have the FX circle on the left-hand side. If it's a named range or a table, it will have the squares. So you can see which ones are named ranges versus which ones are functions. I'm going to double click on subtotal. What the subtotal is going to give you, and you're going to see this used all the time in financial data, you can do multiple functions with it. And I want to do a sum, so I'm just going to double click on the 9, which is the hidden code to the computer to let it know I want to do a sum. So I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to do a comma to separate my arguments, and I want to have it based on the gross wages. So I'm going to click on K10, and I'm going to do Shift Control down arrow because I wanted to select all the way down that column. I'm going to do Control Enter, and I'm going to look at that formula, and you're going to see that it automatically is adding together everything within that column. But if things change by me filtering this data in this table, it will automatically change the answer to that subtotal, by the way. But let me do a couple of other things. When it comes to analyzing data, leadership roles are just whatever role you have within your organization, it doesn't matter. One of the things that you may want to have available is a drop-down list. So data validation, which is described in your handout as well, allows you to do a drop-down list. So on cell K3, I want a drop-down list of all of the individual departments coming from column F, the individual department columns, because I'm going to do gross wages by department. I'm going to do a formula based on that using a sum if. So what I want to do then is on K3, I'm going to go to the Data tab of the ribbon, and then in the Data Tools group, I'm going to click on the icon for Data Validation. On the Settings tab, I'm going to go to Allow Any Value, and I'm going to choose List because I want to create a drop-down list. In the source is where you could physically type, separated by commas, the values you want, or you could actually use a range of cells. I happen to have a worksheet called Legend. This is the unique values coming from the department. There technically is only 3. If I select those, that's going to be my source of this drop-down list. And how I created this legend, by the way, is I copied all of the departments, then I removed duplicates. And it gave me this unique list, just so you know how I did it. I do that all the time. I'm going to click OK. So it brought me back to K3 on this worksheet. Now I have a drop-down arrow that I can choose which department I want to use. So I'm going to go to L3, and I'm going to create a formula that is going to give us the gross wages per department as I change the department name on K3. So on cell L3, I'm going to create a formula using the sum if. Now what the sum if function does, and I'm going to double click on it here just so you can see. I'm going to double click on sum if. So basically what it's looking for is what is the range of cells I want to evaluate, and then what is going to be the criteria, and what is going to be the range of cells I want to add together. So the range that I want it to evaluate is actually going to be based on the department column. So I'm going to go to column F and I'm going to select the departments. I'm going to click and drag all the way down. So I did that Control Shift down arrow. Just so you can see, it adds it in the formula with the table name and the name of the field. In square brackets, it shows the name of the field. It makes it much easier to understand what it's doing, which, by the way, these formulas could all be on the dashboard, which I'll show you in a second. So anyway, now it wants to know what is going to be my criteria. Well, my criteria, if I wanted it to always be the OPS, I could physically type that in the formula. But what if I want it to refer to K3, and K3 is going to change on a regular basis? I don't want to just type in ops and have to go back to the formula and change it. Something else that I could do is quote equal quote. I could put the ampersand in. Then I can click on K3 so that it always refers to that cell. Then I can continue on to the sum range. So it's basically saying whatever is in K3 is going to be my criteria, instead of me putting in the name of the department and having to keep modifying the formula. So now I need to tell it what are the cells I want to add together. Well, I want it to add together the gross wages. So I'm going to select all of the gross wages, and you can do it however you want to do it. I could have had it as a named range, which I most likely would have, but just so you could see, it adds that in as saying the name of the table and then that column, gross wage. I'm just going to Control Enter, and you're going to see that it automatically has added together all of the gross wages, but only based on the department that I have in K3. If I go back and change that to a different department, it's going to automatically update which wage it's finding, the total for that wage. So that's one way to really be able to analyze that information. Now, of course, we could take that further and we could be doing a COUNTIF. So how many entries are actually in the ops group? I could do a COUNTIF to say count all of the departments based on K3, whatever department I have on K3. Or I could say, give me an average if the department matches the whatever department I have on K3. And it's going to be based on the cells within that gross wages. So we have a lot of different if type functions that we could be using. I'll just do an example with one. I'll do the COUNTIF. So, and these are all described within your handout, by the way. I'm going to do equal COU, and I'm going to double click on COUNTIF, where all it wants to know is what is the range of cells I wanted to analyze and what is my criteria. So I wanted to count the departments. So how many entries in that department? So I'm just going to select that range for the department. Once again, it adds it in as the name and then, of course, the department field. I'm going to put in a comma because it wants to know now what is the criteria. Well, once again, just like I did with the SUMIF, I want to do quote equal, and it has to be in quotes because it's actually text. So that's why it's in quotes. And I'm going to do the ampersand again, and I'm going to click on K3 so that it always refers to whatever I put in that cell, instead of me entering ops as my department and having to go back to the formula and change it. I'm going to Control Enter to stay on that cell, and it automatically is giving me an answer of 41. So there's 41 entries that are related to the ops department. If I change the ops department to G&A, it's going to update any formula that is related to that. Now, just to take that a step further, the last function I'm going to do right now is called an XLOOKUP. And I'm going to do this a little quick because I've got several other things I want to get to yet in our short period of time. But I'm going to go to O2, and I'm going to do a lookup based on the employee number to find that employee's gross wages. I'm going to do equal XLOOKUP. If you have not used an XLOOKUP, I don't use a VLOOKUP or an HLOOKUP anymore. This is my replacement for that. So basically, it wants to know, what do I want to look up? I want to look up whichever employee number is on N2. That's going to be my lookup value. Comma, to separate the arguments, it wants to know where is it going to find that employee number. So I'm going to select all of these employee numbers in column H. Now, of course, I could have done my shift control down arrow. I could have had it as a named range, however it is that you want to enter it in. But it's going to add the table name and that field name. Comma, it wants to know, where's the answer coming from? I want the answer to be coming from the wages. So I'm going to select the gross wages because that's where the answer, once it finds that employee, it's going to go to the gross wages column and find the gross wage that matches that employee. Once again, it adds it into the formula based on the name of the table and the gross wages. I'm going to put in a comma to do one more argument, which is optional. I'm going to say, if not found. It is a built-in error code so that if the employee ID number is not found in that list, it will give me whatever error I enter. So I'm going to say EMP not found. And I'm going to put a quote around that because it's text. I'm going to control enter, and it automatically found the gross wage for the employee that I have entered. Now, of course, I could format that cell. However you want to format it, it can be formatted as well. So you can see that employee 10 has this gross wage. Every time I change to a different employee, it's going to update that. And I could have that as a drop down. But if I enter in an employee that is not there, like 00, it's going to come back with that error saying employee not found. So the XLOOKUP is a great option for doing that.